All right, welcome back. Full disclosure, today's topic is what got me interested in philosophy way back when I was taking introduction to philosophy. I had I had the unit on this topic, and I really was interested in this question of what makes me continue to be the same person through time. So I was thinking about myself. I'm a college student. I'm looking back on, my life. I'm looking forward to my future, and there's this assumption that we make, which is that we are the same person now as that person will be at age 50 or 60 or whatever. And we think that we're the same person now as we were when we were, say, 12 or 8. But it's an interesting question of what justifies our assumption about who we are, given that our bodies are changing all the time. So, like, we're not physically identical to um, to who we were in the past or who we will be in the future. We're not even mentally identical to that person because there'll be changes in memories and experiences. So, what is it that justifies our belief that we continue to exist through time? And then there's another question we'll get to at the end, which is our continuing to exist through time important? So we'll talk about that. Excuse me. Other full disclosure, this I'm excited about, is that my introduction to philosophy professor way back when was Raymond Martin, the author of the reading for today. So I learned about this topic from him, and he's internationally known expert on this topic. Um, okay, so let's just kind of think about it broadly, and then I'll show you some slides. The slides I'm going to show you, the way the theories are worded is kind of, I don't know, quirky, um, but you'll get the idea. The examples we'll talk about today are hypothetical examples to try to get us to think, about this question. Um, but some of the examples are kind of wild. It's not a problem, in my opinion, but it's kind of like you have to think about strange examples in order to think about this issue. Um, so, there are two basic ideas about what makes you the same person through time. One is that it's physical facts about you that make you the same person through time. So it could be like your brain, for instance. We'll look at a theory that talks about that. Having a connection with your brain is what makes you the same person through time. Other people think that it's mental facts about you that make you the same person through time. So they're thinking, well, you can undergo all kinds of physical changes, but as long as there's some mental continuity, you're the same person. Let's start off talking about physical theories of personal identity. Again, the wording for these theories is, I guess, it's precise, and consequently, it's a little awkward. Not many people talk like this. So we've got the body theory. All right. So the body theory, in a nutshell, is saying that you go where your body goes. But in particular, it says this: a person, let's call them P1, at a time, let's call it T1, is the same person as a person P2 at another time T2, if and only if P1's body at that time is linked with T2's body at the other time. So linked doesn't necessarily mean identical. It means there's overlap, there's continuity. Um, so think about yourself today compared to yourself yesterday. Okay, so this time yesterday, think about that person, think about yourself today, and I'm pretty confident you're going to say, I'm the same person as that person yesterday. And the body theory can explain why. And it's because your bodies overlap quite a bit. Now, it's possible that you've lost some cells from yesterday and you've gained some new cells. There's going to be a lot of overlap in terms of your body. So, the body theory would say that here you are P1 at this time right now. You are the same person as you yesterday at this other time yesterday, if and only if your body now is linked with your body then, and your bodies are linked, because there's so much um, carrying forward from yesterday of your body. All right, now for each of these theories, we are going to talk about how someone might object to the theory. I want you to get both sides. I want you to decide for yourself what makes you the same person over time. So, an example that poses a problem for the body theory has to do with the brain. So, the general idea is that there might be a situation where somebody loses their brain, and consequently, we would say they're not the same person. But the body theory would say they're still the same person as long as there's a lot of overlap with the rest of their body. So in this example, the doctors took out your brain. Maybe they were doing some kind of medical procedure, and then they did an oopsie and dropped it. All right, so they dropped your brain by mistake, and now your brain is busted. It's not going to work. It's on the floor. It's not happening. When we hear about something like that, sorry to bring up something like that, but when we do, we would say, well, you did not survive. And the body theory would say that you did survive because even though you lost your brain, there's so much of your body that's still linked with the individual before the surgery. Um, and so that doesn't seem intuitive, that you are the same person, because once you've lost your brain, that's an important part of you. And so it doesn't seem like you're the same person. So the body theory would say that you're the same person um, after they drop the brain compared to the person who was there before the surgery. Um, but because the bodies are linked, but intuitively it doesn't seem like you're the same person because you lost your brain. Well, you might think, well, then let's forget about the whole body and just focus on the brain. So this is the one I mentioned in the introduction. The brain theory is basically saying you go where your brain goes. So a person P1 at a time T1 is the same person as a person P2 at another time T2, if and only if P1's brain at that time is linked with P2's brain at that time. So the brain theory would not say that you survived the surgery that resulted in your brain getting dropped on the floor, because there's no longer a linkage between you post surgery and you pre surgery. Post surgery, you don't have the brain. So before the surgery, you had the brain, then you lost it. Once you've lost your brain, you've essentially died. According to the brain theory, you're not the same person, you're ceasing to exist. And again, intuitively, that makes sense. We want to say that in that unfortunate example where they do an oopsie and drop your brain, that you're not the same person. So the brain theory says things that make sense about examples where you lose your brain. Now we're going to talk about how someone might object to the brain theory. General idea behind this objection is that there could be two people who have very different personalities, but they have the same brain. I know that's kind of weird, but there actually was a movie about this. Um, and so I never actually saw the whole movie. It's called Freaky Friday. And apparently there's a Freaky Friday 2, I guess, that was made not that long ago with the same people in it. So we have Lindsay Lohan is the daughter of Jamie Lee Curtis. And I guess what happens is they eat um, a fortune cookie and then their personalities switch. So their brains are the same, but then all of a sudden their personalities switch. So the joke throughout the movie, right, is that people see this young person, but the personality inside is the mom, and then the other way around. They see the mom, but then the personality inside is the daughter. Um, and and so intuitively, um, Lindsay Lohan is not the same person as her mom because they have different personalities. Um, but what happens is their brains never moved. So the brain theory would say that Lindsay before the fortune cookie eating is the same as Lindsay after the fortune cookie eating. Um, when really it doesn't seem like they're the same because all of a sudden the personality switched. It's a little far fetched, but it's enough for us to see that this kind of thing could happen. And if it were to happen, the brain theory would lead us astray and tell us something that doesn't seem correct about the example. And so at this point, we're going to shift to how someone might try to explain what makes us the same person through time by focusing on mental things. So here we've got memories. All right. So this is a popular idea that you go where your memories go. So what if somebody, you know, becomes an altogether different person, including they don't have any of their memories? Sometimes people say, well, the reason why they're an altogether different person is that they don't have their memories. So the memory theory is saying a person P1 at a time T1 is the same person as a person P2 at another time T2, if and only if P1's memories at T1 are linked with P2's memories at T2. So if we go back to the Freaky Friday example, Lindsay Lohan is not the same person as her mom, even after they ate the cookies, the fortune cookies, because their memories are no longer the same. So remember how they eat the fortune cookies, and then all of a sudden, the person who looks like Lindsay Lohan actually has the personality and the memories and all these things of the mom, and the other way around. So when we watch the movie, we're supposed to think that after they've eaten the fortune cookies, you look at the person who looks like Lindsay Lohan and you're really thinking that's the mom. And you look at the person who looks like the mom, but you're really thinking that's the daughter. And the memory theory would go along with that and say, yeah, that's because the memories switched. All right. Now, another kind of example that poses a problem comes from, oh, so many stories. And I love the good Lifetime movie. Um, so, this is a classic sort of Lifetime movie example. Again, it's trying to challenge the memory definition. And it's this example of the husband who ends up having full amnesia after the car accident or whatever it was. Um, and in this kind of cheesy movie, um, the wife, still loves that husband and, um, you know, is dedicated to him and all that. Um, but he doesn't have his memories anymore. So maybe his character traits are still there. He's still kind. He just doesn't remember her. And so the memory theory would say that the husband has not continued to exist because he lost all his memories. He's got full amnesia. And yet, so many aspects of his personality are still there. He just doesn't remember stuff. So he's still got a sensitivity to other people. He's still able to like think rationally and solve problems um, and have all these character traits that he had before. It's just he's missing the memories. So when we see movies like that, we're inclined to say it's still her husband. Like that's that's still the same person. It's just he lost his memories. But the memory theory would say that once he's lost his memories, he's not the same person. So that's the clash. That's the concern, is that the memory theory would say that the husband, once he gets full amnesia, no longer exists. And yet we think he still exists because he's got so much of the rest of his personality is in place. Okay. So I'm going to give you one more um, theory of personal identity, and this is the psychology theory. And it's not as specific as the memory theory. So a person P1 at a time T1 is the same person as a person P2 at another time T2, if and only if P1 psychology at T1 is linked with P2 psychology at T2. So what makes up your psychology would be memories, but it's also other things. It's your character traits, your dispositions, your mind, people say. So, like in the Lifetime movie example, yes, the husband has full amnesia, but they're still the same person because um, so much of their psychology still is linked with the person before the accident. So the psychology theory would say, well, that's still the same person because there's still a lot of linkage with their character, for instance. And again, intuitively, we want to say that the husband's the same, even after the accident. So now, in terms of how someone might object to this theory, this is where things are going to get a little wild and wacky. Um, Raymond Martin, in the reading, has an example of what he calls fission rejuvenation. I'm going to give you a variation on that example. Um, it's a similar kind of idea. The basic idea, and this is going to be used to object to the psychology theory, the basic idea is that there could be replicas made of someone where they're identical replicas, and we're going to be inclined to say that the two replicas that are created are different people, even though they have the exact same psychology as the person they're a replica of. So Raymond Martin's got an example like that. What's a little weird about it is that two replicas are made, and then one is sort of dormant until the other one is like at the end of their life, and then the dormant one kind of takes over. So it's sort of like a way of extending your life, the way um, Raymond Martin talks about it, or at least you're going to feel as if your life is being extended, even though he says it actually isn't. Um, the example I'm going to give you is also about fission, where there's like a replica, but it's going to be more about like teletransportation. All right, so again, this is a weird sort of example, but we need weird examples in order to think about these theories, because the theories are kind of um, proposing ideas that, in order to test, we have to think about hypotheticals that may be a little outside of the norm. So here we've got my example of a teletransportation machine, where you go into the machine and a button is pushed. You are then destroyed, but at the exact same time, a replica of you exists in one room. We'll say it's flow 112, and another replica of you exists in flow 114, the room right next door. So these replicas are identical to each other. They are identical to you when you walked into the teletransportation machine, and but unfortunately, when the button is pushed, you are destroyed. So all that remains are these two replicas, who are psychologically and physically identical to you. So if we go back to the psychological theory, it would say that you go where your psychology goes. Well, take the the person who is in flow 112. You walked into the teletransportation machine. You are now the same person as the person who is in flow 112 because your psychologies are linked. Um, and that sounds okay. I think if all that happened in the teletransportation machine is that you transported to another place and you had the identical psychology, um, then we would be okay saying, yeah, I survived the transport. And this is really a lot like old Star Treks. If now I'm dating myself, but they had teletransportation on that show, and we never batted an eye when Captain Kirk would be beamed to another planet. We thought, yeah, there's Captain Kirk, even though it was like a replica of him that was sent there, seemingly. I guess it could have been at least. The weird part of the story in this story, though, is that there's two replicas. So there's also the one in flow one in 114. And what would we say about that person? Well, we would say the same thing that you are, if we use the psychology theory, you are the same person as the person who is in flow 114 because the psychologies are linked. Again, that person is psychologically identical to you when you walked into the teletransportation machine. And so now we've got a strange situation where there is a replica of you in flow 112, there's a replica of you in flow 114. And once those replicas are existing, they're free to go, right? They can um, go in the hallway and meet each other in the hallway and give each other high fives and all that. But like the problem is that we don't think that those are the same people, right? So there's now the person in 112, there's the person in 114. It doesn't seem like we can have one person existing in those two places at the same time, especially when we imagine that they interact with each other, right? They meet in the hallway and they say, hey, you look just like me. And what do you remember? And they have similar memories, but from that point forward, they're experiencing new things. And so one might go on and live a certain life, and another might go on and live a different life. So intuitively, they seem to be different people, but the psychology theory would say that you're the same person as the person who exists in 112, like we said, and that, but also you're the same person as the person who exists in flow 114, like we said, and yet it doesn't seem like you can be the same person for both of those people because you can't be in two places at the same time. So the psychology theory would say that you exist in two different places. Intuitively, that doesn't make sense. All right. Well, okay. So we have an objection to the psychology theory, but what can we learn from this teletransportation example? And this is where Raymond Martin talks about a phenomenon of, like, I guess, something that we care about, which is we care about. I guess there's a class of things that are important to us, and one of them is what matters to us in survival. So here we have this idea that a person P1 has what matters to them in survival in a person P2 if P1 cares about P2 the way they care about themselves. So Martin thinks you have what matters to you in survival as long as you have an interest in this future person that's the same way you think about yourself when you do continue to exist. So, um, think about like normal situations where you sacrifice for your future self. So, you go to school, for instance, right? So, you go to school, you take classes so that you can have a degree. You you take some pain now so that you can have future pleasure. And you're willing to do that because you think that the person in your future will be you. You care about your future person the way you care about yourself. Okay. So going to my teletransportation example, you care about the person in flow 112. If um, somebody gave you the option of like taking some small pain now to prevent a much greater pain for your replica, you would likely do that because you anticipate that future pain as if it were to happen to you, right? So you're thinking that bad things that might happen to the person in flow 112 are bad things that are happening to you. So you're going to care about them as if they're you. And similarly for the individual in flow 114. So for both of those individuals, you care about them the way you care about yourself, and yet we know that they're not the same person. So what seems to be happening here is that even though you don't survive the teletransportation, you're getting what matters to you in survival. You're still having there be a person that you care about the way you care about yourself. And so another way of putting this is that it's possible for you to die. Now, I know it's kind of weird to say that you die in this teletransportation example because there's two replicas, but it does seem like you die because you can't be in two places at the same time. So it's possible, I guess this example illustrates, it's possible for you to die and still get what matters to you in survival. Now, that's to me pretty fascinating if true that you can get what matters to you in survival even if you don't survive. And it does open up, a lot of questions about why do we fear death? So like, would you fear death if on your deathbed they would just make replicas of you? And then would you think that um, would you still get what matters to you in survival even if you don't survive? Um, so it is kind of interesting to think that maybe um, what matters to you in survival is not the survival part, but perhaps just having there be a future person who's linked with your psychology. Um, so it is interesting to think about death and why we worry about it. And could there be situations where even though we die, we're not worried? And I think that's kind of behind the scenes here with this example. Again, a moral of the story that Martin is taking away from these fission examples is that it seems possible for you to get what matters to you in survival, even if you don't actually survive. If that's possible, it opens up a can of worms. It makes you think about the possibility of maybe still getting what matters to you, even if you don't survive. Um, and then it makes you think, well, what is it that matters to me in survival? Is it having the same brain? Is it your psychology? Is it your memories? Like, what is it that makes you care about this future person as if they were you? Good stuff to think about. I'll let you think for yourself about what you believe, and you may prefer one of the um, theories of personal identity that we've talked about today. Remember how we talked about four? There was the body theory, the brain theory, the memory theory, and the psychology theory. So you can decide if you prefer any of those. And you can think about this question of what matters to you in survival. Thank you. Bye bye.